Let me share my screen. So I hope today we can finalize our our scope of our backlog for Milestone 2. We still have several open questions, and especially there are plenty of open questions regarding the technical implementation of the stories currently located in our Milestone 2 backlog. And I propose to finalize the decision regarding the feature we already started to discuss. So mass inventory action, which was initially described by Mark, and we already have a prototype prepared by Ricardo. And we even already have some documentation prepared by Lori. Lori, could you please point out where this documentation is located? Just to...
Sure. Right there in the bottom of the user guide list, it says Mass Action Tool.
I see.
Yeah, it's just general information. I don't have the full screenshots for the updated.
Okay, cool. So we already had a short chat with Mark regarding proposed changes. As based on the meeting we had with contributors, it was decided to apply some changes to the initial look and feel. And the initial look and feel actually implies 3 different operations: assign to source, unassign from source, and transfer inventory. And the main idea behind the assign to source operation is to create empty out of stock source items with 0 quantity. Unassigned from source operation actually implies dropping of all the checked source items. So all of these source items would be lost after the operation would be proceeded. And transfer inventory implies moving the inventory from all the sources to the destination source. And based on the discussion we had before, it was proposed to drop unassigned, assign to source operation, because from perspective of Ricardo and Felix, it was they considered that this operation is useless because merchants still need to make some action to provide some data or make an export and consequent import to fill the source items with data. But as I understand, Mark has some concerns regarding that, and we can discuss and finalize the solution regarding the assign to source operation. Whether we need to keep this operation or it's okay to drop it.
So the question is around whether we should have assign to source at all.
Yep.
And I think that the reason you're skeptical, if I remember from the last meeting, is that this is representing only the first step really in an inventory transfer.
Yep.
So time needs to take place, followed by setting the quantity for each product. Okay. There's still value to the merchant to have assigned to source as an option, especially in cases where they will not want to set the same quantity for each product. That's an unlikely scenario. So it may be easier to understand if we have just an example. So the example is if we have a default source,
Yes.
and we have our products assigned to that default source, and they have established quantities. Then as a merchant, I want to assign these products to a new source that I've created. Maybe the wrinkle here is whether we want to assign them and have them copy the same quantities they have on the source they are now. Because we can make the assignment and we can have them all at a quantity of 0. Or we could make the assignment and have them copy the quantity that they have on the source that they are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Which would be, it's more like a move operation, although we wouldn't deduct the quantity from the original source.
But because maybe I'm wrong, but I was considering that, for example, currently, for example, moving the source item from one source to another one, to the destination source, we are still keeping the initial source item. We're still keeping it in a database, but we just nullify the quantity in the initial source item. So, for example, if we are moving the stock from the default source to source A, as a result of operation, we will create the source item for the source A for the corresponding product, and we'll move all the quantity which is currently exists on a default source item. But along with that, when the operation is finished, we will still have the source item for the default source, but this source item would have quantity 0. So we can consider this, for example, whether we need to keep the initial source item or not as a dedicated operation here, but as a property of the transfer operation. So, for example, we can add a checkbox for transfer inventory UI, which says whether we need to keep the initial source item, because currently it's not possible, for example, to move partially inventory from one source to another. So we move inventory fully from the source to the destination source. That's why we can just make it as a property of this operation, whether the initial source item should be preserved or we can drop it as a result of the transfer.
Yeah, so a couple points. The first is whether we unassign from the first one. I agree we should not unassign because that's a separate action that we want the merchant to decide if they want unassignment. For the second one of how we set the quantity, are you talking about the transfer inventory option or the assign to source option?
Yep, transfer inventory option.
Okay, yeah. So for transfer inventory, that's correct. Because the way most people interpret the word transfer is something is moving from one place to another. So it would be removed from the place it started. So in this case, because otherwise they would have to take some type of second mass action to reduce the quantity on where it came from, in your case here, the default source. Mm-hmm. We want to prevent them from having to do that, or the chance that they could forget to do that, and they would effectively double their inventory counts for the selected products.
Mm-hmm. But But do you consider, like, maybe I'm wrong, but I was my ideas were dictated by assumption that all the UI controls and all the possibilities, all the actions which can be applied via the admin UI, supposed to represent the finite business action. And from my perspective, the creation of empty source item is not a finite business action, but is just a part of some just one step on a way of making some business scenario. So maybe it makes sense to provide like a more high level kind of coarse grain. That could be considered kind of coarse grain API versus fine grain API, where there is like a low level API for doing something. But I thought that on the level of admin UI, we should provide something more high level and like which represent the finite business operation.
Are you referring to the assigned to source here?
Yep, assigned.
Okay, because so if you think about it, the way that we have always set this up is we have two different things we're allowing the merchant to track for a source. So the first is whether the product is what we call stocked in that location. You could think about it as, is there a place on the shelf for this product to go in the warehouse or other location? The second is, what is the quantity in stock? And we do maintain those separately in the database. So the specific business action that they are completing by using assigned to source is deciding that they want a product to be stocked in a location. For example, if I open a new warehouse, I may decide I want a wide variety of my products. Some of them, I can select them with filters to be available in this warehouse, but I haven't moved any inventory in there yet. So I can assign all of them to this source, and then in a later step, I can define the quantities I want for those products. They are separate business actions.
Okay, I got your point. So potentially, the guys who work on this particular warehouse can get prepared that some particular product types will be delivered to the warehouse, so they can prepare some. They can free some space and get prepared for products which would be stocked a little bit later.
That's correct.
Okay. Regarding the unassigned from source operation, there was two questions: whether the naming is correct, and the second one, whether we need to whether we need to provide some kind of alert saying this that you're going to remove the source items with a not zero quantity, and after the operation we will lose the data. So as I understand from the semantic perspective and from the naming perspective, you consider that unassigned from source is a correct naming for this particular option, and you agree to introduce this kind of alert warning the admin regarding the potential loss of sensitive data.
Yeah, so actually on this one, I might look to Laurier or even UX for guidance. What we're doing from a business perspective is removing the fact that a product is stocked from somewhere, as well as setting the quantity to zero. Unassign almost seems like the opposite of assign. If we don't feel like that communicates enough to the user what will really happen, we could change it to something like remove from source. A different action that more clearly communicates the fact that not only will it be unassigned, but the quantity will be removed. Or we could have some sort of pop-up or confirmation that they have to go through.
But like for me, kind of assignment, this is something not more than just a link. For example, we have assignment product to category, and this is just a link. And for example, if you'll drop that link, you'll still get two entities, product and category, and you would not lose the data. So there is no possibility to lose sensitive data, because actually all the sensitive data is represented by product and by category, and we'll just drop a linkage. But here, on assigning from source, we will lose the sensitive data, which is the quantity of product located on particular source.
Right. So it sounds like you prefer we use an alternative word like remove.
I'm just asking because I'm not a native speaker, so I'm just sharing with my impression from naming and my first level association.
Sure. Lori, what do you think?
It could go either way. We use assign to show that you're mapping and then you're setting your product inventory amounts. So unassign does have that idea to the merchant that they are going to completely remove it from that source. I don't see a problem with having it as unassigned and then a pop-up that would inform them what will happen. Do they want to continue this, or do they rather want to transfer inventory? That's something that I was helping out with UX in MOM, or in order management. They were doing something similar, and we added that kind of step so it would match some things that they're doing as well.
Okay, so it sounds like you're advocating for keeping the unassigned from source title, but providing some sort of additional information to the user they need to click through.
Yeah, even if we were having a remove action, I'd still want to warn them. Otherwise, we need to have some wording on that page of when they're doing that remove. There needs to be some transition that they are alerted of what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're writing the bottom line. We're preserving the unassigned from source from source naming, and we introduce the alerting, which we agreed before. And regarding the third and probably the most important operation, transfer inventory, it was proposed to introduce from, because initially it was used an assumption that we will move all the total inventory among all the source items to which particular product is currently assigned. So introducing the unassign, yeah, introducing the transfer inventory, doesn't have resources, skip inventory source. Yeah, so we will introduce the from and to, and on a from it would be possible to choose particular source from where we are moving data, because currently on our product grid, and we are going to introduce add this functionality to the product grid, it's not possible to filter by source, because we have aggregated data in a cell representing all the source item assigned to particular product. As I understand, Mark, you're okay with this proposal?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so looks like we agreed from product perspective on a mass action tool, and Mark, could you please apply the changes for current GitHub issue, and we can communicate after that to Ricardo, who is currently continue working on this ticket, and he can apply the corresponding changes to his proof of concept, and this is pull request.
And if you need any text for the alerts, I'm happy to help out with that too.
Great. So the two changes, if I'm remembering correctly, that we'll make are notifications for unassigned is an added step, and then allowing the user to designate a from source when they're doing a transfer.
Yes, and along with just to finalize, what's our decision regarding the transfer inventory? Whether it makes sense from your perspective to add, for example, a checkbox saying that after the transfer inventory, remove all the source item from the source from where we making the migration. Or no need to add this checkbox, and if needed, merchant can select this product once again and make an unassigned operation.
So it's like you're proposing them to have the ability through a checkbox to select copy or move.
Yeah, copy or move. Exactly. This is exactly what I was proposed, like a copy or move. Because, for example, from why actually I'm proposing and why I'm considering that it could be common business case, because currently we have some special meaning for default source and default stock, and it's not possible, for example, to add other sources to default stock except the default one. So all the merchants who would like to start using the multi-sourcing functionality, they actually need to create new custom stock, and actually they need to migrate, they need to move all the source items currently assigned to default source to newly created custom source. And for me, it looks like a pretty common operation, for merchant who would like to start to use MSI functionality is to create custom stock, custom source, and make a migration, maybe several custom sources, and make a migration from the default source to custom sources. And after that, actually, this merchant can not even use the default source at all, and they will use for all the further operation just custom sources. But they will still have this. Default source item, which is null, which is 0 on all the product pages, because as a result of migration operation, we are not removing the default source item from the default source, so they will still have the default source. So it could be rotated. Actually, it would not affect how the system works, but it could be potentially rotating for merchants that there are a lot of empty source items assigned to default source.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I will review it and update. The way that we have transfer done now is that it's by default a move. So we can extend that functionality to allow them to do move or copy. Mm-hmm. The way you had described it is copy would be the default behavior, and then if checkbox is enabled, it would become a move. Mm-hmm. I need to think about whether that's we should enable the most common use case without having them needing to check something. So I'll take a look at that and write it up. But I understand what you're describing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so looks like we're done with this particular story.
Yes.
I have a question. Will there be any REST APIs that do this, or are the bulk APIs that other project, community engineering project handle?
That's a great question. So in the implementation details, we are going to use bulk API. So the bulk API is implemented in the scope of in Magento Enterprise Edition, but recently bulk APIs were ported to Magento 2.2 and Magento 2.3. So taking into account that Magento MSI is going to be a feature of Magento 2.3, we can use the bulk API and the IMQP protocol and the message queue. So we're going to use bulk API as a way how under the hood we'll process all this separation.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So now regarding the source and stock configuration, yesterday I created this document and shared it in MSI Slack channel. In MSI Slack channel, and there is also a voting regarding a particular implementation, which is also described in the scope of this document. But currently, like the main idea here is that we, for us, it's a desirable state to have MSI modules and actually the whole inventory mechanism, which can fully substitute existing catalog inventory module. And ideally, for us to have the catalog inventory module to be deprecated on the level of Composer, so on the level of the whole module and all the interfaces belonging to this module since Magento 2.3. And actually this give us a possibility to dismantle the module, catalog inventory, and totally remove it from the Magento code base since Magento 2.4. Actually, this is pretty common practice for us, how we introduce backward incompatible changes. So we initially we introduce a deprecated tag for some particular interface, and this deprecated tag is valid for the whole major Magento release. And since the next major Magento release, we are able to remove this particular interface. This is actually what we plan to do for catalog inventory module. And actually there are two things or three things which prevent us to do it. So these are stories for inventory configuration, because currently on MSI we are not having own configuration persistence mechanism. We just have a wrapper. So we provide the API, and our implementation is just a wrapper over the existing legacy stock item implementation provided by catalog inventory module. And also currently we don't provide support for bundle and group products. And if it's more or less clear how to do support for bundle and group products, we just need to introduce indexation for bundle and group products. Regarding the configuration, the things are a little bit trickier because currently, like what we have now in our existing MSI implementation, all the configuration of inventory, we consider that all the configuration is applied on the level of stock. So, for example, all the options like manage stock, backorder, use quantity decimal, min quantity, max quantity, quantity increment, and all the configuration options. Actually, they are applicable on the level of stock, and they are reachable via the stock item configuration object. But if we, since the time we are going to start working on configuration, on own mechanism of configuration on MSI, we prepared here a table and describe to which particular origin the corresponding configuration option belongs to. So whether it's stock or source. For example, here we see that use quantity decimal is a configuration option belonging to source but not to stock. So it's supposed to be specified on the level of source item, and it can be and it should be calculated on the level of stock item. The same true, for example, for back orders, because from my perspective and from perspective of contributors from community whom I talked with, it makes sense to specify back orders as an option on the level of sources. For example, to specify, to say that we have drop shipper, and all the products belonging assigned to this drop shipper actually will have a back order enabled automatically. And on the level of stock, we can just calculate whether the back order is enabled or not. So, for example, having the source A, source B, and source C, and saying that back order is enabled for the source B, we can say that for the stock A, for which all these sources are assigned to, we can say that configuration option for back order on a stock A is calculated based on values we have on a source level, and we can say that if back order is enabled for one of the sources, it can be enabled for the stock as well, especially if it's a quantity, like if the threshold is 0. Because if the threshold is negative, which is also dedicated story, which we consider like a possibility to apply negative threshold for back order, these things also get a little bit trickier, because we also need to provide some more sophisticated calculation whether back order is like what the back order value is supposed to be on the level of stock. But here we try to make a decision whether the configuration option should be specified on the level of source or on the level of stock. And here we see, because the main idea was still to build some interface which would be used on a level of front end, like a stock item configuration, which will provide the whole list of possible configuration options, which would be used on our front end scenarios. And this interface supposed to be kind of lightweight generated index, which gonna be used on a front end to build and answer all the possible questions raised from the front end side. And here we need to make like two decisions, whether we don't have overlapping between the configuration options we have on the level of source and on the level of stock.
Can you hear me, Igor?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Quick question. I missed probably a bit. What story is this discussion about?
These are stories about source item configuration and stock item configuration.
And do we have them on board?
Currently, we don't have board because we don't have Milestone started. We are just forming the backlog, and as soon as we will prioritize and form the backlog, we will put all the stories on board, and we will start working by this product backlog.
Okay, so my suggestion is to write down some scenarios that we will be implementing, because not to lose track of the discussion.
Okay, so yeah, makes sense.
I mean, during the meeting, because it's easier to track what we agreed to.
Yeah, but we just discussed one story regarding the mass action for source item migration, and
that one I missed. I'm just okay. So I would like on meeting. Sorry, just from previous meetings, not to lose track. It's just a proposal, just a suggestion, not to lose track of where discussion goes. To write down scenario immediately for the story that we grew.
Okay, I got your point. So back to the conversation. So here we need to make two main decisions. The first one, and the first decision was that there is no configuration options which can be specified by merchant or by admin on the level of source and on the level of stock. So currently we are making the segregation and saying that, for example, back orders is an option which can be specified on the level of source only, and it is calculatable on the level of stock. And opposite to it, for example, we have a managed stock option. This is the option we can specify on the level of stock only. And there is no possibility to specify the same option on the level of source. This is pretty important for us from the process of how we're gonna build this index and how we're gonna make all the fallbacks. Because if we would have some configuration options which can be specified both on the level of source and stock, that will introduce a lot of unclarity and additional sophistication. So this is one pretty important decision which should be made. Probably, Mark, you need to have some time to look through all the options which are mentioned in this table and confirm that there is no inventory configuration options which can be specified on the level both level source and stock. And another thing, because another thing is scoping, because currently we inherited all the scope system which we currently have in Magento. So we have the global scope and we have website scope. I don't know whether it's, yeah, we have the global scope, we have there is no possibility, probably it's on advanced inventory page. Oh no, that's just so we are going to introduce along with global scope, we are going to introduce the stock level configuration for some of these configuration options, and probably this additional level of configuration, like a stock configuration.
Did you say store level configuration?
Stock. So global, stock, and for example, here you can see the example. So there is a possibility to specify back order on the level of source item. So just specify this configuration on the level of particular product, which is assigned to particular source.
So this is specifying backorder status configuration option, like if it can be backwarded, right?
Yep, exactly. Also,
and you say that you want to do it per stock, per source item, right?
Yeah, per source item in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Also, along with that, as we say that backorder is a configuration which can be applied on the level of source. For example, there is a drop shipper, and I would like to say that all the products, all the source items, which are assigned to this drop shipper, supposed to have the backorder status by default. So this is there should be possible to specify a backorder on a level of source. So, for example, we should have another scope. And
a quick and related question, just for interfaces. Why does every option have a separate operation to set? Why don't have?
There is also another option how this could be implemented, like this interface. I believe this will irritate you less. Like set backorder status configuration for source item, for source, and for global.
Okay, like I just want to understand the principle by which we group.
Actually, it was an idea to ask from community whether they what the options they like more, whether they like granular comments or whether they like facade over comments. And as you, for example, you can see people, at least people from MSI community, they prefer to use granular comments here. But actually, from my perspective, to have such many interfaces is probably is not so convenient. That's why, especially from my perspective, I prefer this option.
I'm sorry, everything dies on me today, so it dropped out. So the general principle: how do we group configuration options? Why can't we just say, as we had source item configuration interface, and where you can specify all?
So we would have dedicated commands for each particular inventory configuration. Like in this case, we have a dedicated command for backorder, and there is a possibility to specify backorder on different levels. Because we also need to keep contract, and for example, backorder status is integer, and if you're talking about is saleable or is decimal, it could be float or another value, another type.
Okay, so the quick answer is basically for type safety and for autocomplete in ID.
Yep, exactly. For type safety. And they also probably for different configuration, or for some of the configuration option, we would not have additional level of scoping at all. It would be just possible to specify the configuration option on global level, or on source or on stock level, and on source item and stock item. Because, for example, like in this case, you can see for the safety stock threshold, it can be possible to specify configuration option on the level of stock item and on the level of stock only.
Okay.
That's why
it makes sense for me. So I understand the motivation. It makes sense. The motivation. I'm just trying to understand. It might be a good thing to ask on general community, because some people, they don't like this interface segregation where you have to inject for every small operation, you have to inject every interface. And there is one more downside to this, or maybe not downside, maybe one additional consideration is that if you build a form, you cannot build a form that will accept
exactly.
fields and automatically populate configuration. We'll have to write operation for every operation. We'll have to write code manually. Yeah.
Exactly, and actually that was a main root cause why you see we have here these nullable return types, because for example, to use this checkbox, we need to do it, because actually we don't have a real application when we need to apply like null types. We can always do a fallback. For example, we can not have the force this option is specified on the level of stock item, but we can always make a fallback to the force stock, and we can always return the real float value. But along with that, we would have a clean interface. But just for the sake of supporting these checkboxes, we need to have a return type like nullable, or we need to introduce a dedicated interface which will proceed with the fallbacks and always.
Yeah. I would prefer that other option, because anyway, if I understand correctly, like, do you have already implementation for that form? Because so anyway, if you when you start to implement this form, and if it will work with this interface, you will need some code. You will either have to read the reflection and automatically build the form or something like that, or you will need some form handler that will know the specific interface, and it will know that there is a nullable type, and you can always put that nullable logic into that interface.
You know why I don't like this idea? Because you will bring the internals actually into the business logic, because this handler will, what it will do, it will call, especially it will call here like for source item, it will get null. It should go like upper level and call all that methods to build the form correctly.
Well, I wouldn't say if you implement it in form handler, yes, it might be breaking encapsulation. But if you implement it in a separate type that wraps this for this specific client, it would be more closer to interface segregation. It would be closer for this, because for form you need this logic. For other clients, you might not need this logic.
Exactly. That's actually why I even thought about introducing actually API for UI. So we already have admin UI interfaces.
View models.
Sorry?
View models.
Yeah. But in MSI, we have admin UI models.
Yeah.
And we can introduce API namespace there. And in the scope of admin UI API, we can introduce this interface, which will make fallbacks.
Okay, let's discuss it separately. I think this is a more generic question to UI and view models, but let's go back to this specific store and stock. So yeah, that's an interesting topic. We can discuss it later.
So guys, we have 10 minutes left. What will be the scope of the milestone? Maybe let's focus on that question.
The scope of the milestone. So let me. So the scope of the milestone gonna be, we already have two stories beyond implemented right now. The negative quantity.
Before Igor looks, Eugene, quick question: why do we need scope of milestone? Why don't make it per sprint? Scope of sprint, and after every sprint you do some release, because we already have a beta, right? And
yeah, so it's kind of scope for sprint. The next sprint starts now and first week of September. That's how we define it.
Okay, so milestone is basically a sprint, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
yeah, we will grab already two stories which currently are beyond work by Alessandra and Ricardo. So this story are about the mass inventory action, which we just discussed and finalized with Mark. So this will get into the upcoming milestone or sprint. and the next one gonna be negative threshold for backorder functionality, which is negative threshold for backorder functionality. And along that, we will take the configuration and also we'll try to make a parallelization and try to propose community to step in on working on support of complex product types by so actually bundle and grouped product. So that's gonna be our main focus for Milestone 2. That's that's gonna be our scope. These 4 stories and these 2 stories.
So support negative threshold, stock items, stock configuration, source config.
Yeah, and mass inventory action.
Oh, okay. So it's basically a story for migrating from a single source to.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, good.
And these 4 stories.
And what order will be for this?
Actually, like, we don't have a precise order. Like, we have some priorities, but taking into account that we have enough contributors and we are able to spread the work among them, and taking into account that 2 of these 6 stories already started and people have been working on these stories, we will try to make them simultaneously at the same time. And we'll see, because I'm not sure, because currently also this is a summertime and kind of summertime sadness, and many developers are on vacation now. And
yeah, that's why it's better to actually have some priority. So if you have focused stories, you'll be able to deliver them earlier. Story by story, rather waiting for everybody to finish the work.
What time frame are we talking about? Is it 2 weeks?
No, it's
4 weeks.
It's gonna be by the end of August. So we supposed to stop feature development from the early beginning of September. So we have like kind of 6 weeks, something like that. So, but we would not be waiting for delivering all of the stories. Actually, I assume that some of these stories could not be not finished till the end of the sprint, and we will go just without them. For example,
it's good, but worst case if none of the stories is finished. So that's why it's better to keep a focus.
Two stories are almost.
Okay, so let's agree what are the biggest problems for us, right?
The biggest technical challenge for us is source and stock item configuration. That's actually why I propose to make a focus on finalizing the configuration design and starting to making a refactoring and applying it to MSI.
Yeah, so it looks, so for now we have a dependency on legacy MSI inventory implementation, and the thing that link us to that legacy implementation are source item and stock item configuration, right?
Yep, exactly.
Do we have other I don't think we have other dependencies. There was
bundle and grouped.
Bundle and group. So all of these stories, all of these 4 stories, supposed to eliminate this dependency.
Okay. So, but basically, source and stock items they create this dependency for all products, and bundle and grouped only on stores that use those 2 products. So, first 2 stories are higher priority, second 2 stories are lower priority, and third 2 stories are the least priority, right? But it looks pretty.
This is also kind of important because, if I'm not wrong, you always consider it as a part of MVP. So.
Yeah, that's probably one of
your favorite stories among all the stories that are in Magento track.
I think Mark's favorite story too. But I agree. But I agree that dependency on legacy inventory is higher priority. Well, from technical side, it's higher priority.
Yeah. So this looks like a scope for the upcoming sprint, for the upcoming milestone. And,
Okay, please create epics for them, and we should have the tasks.
okay, let's get back to discussion of.
We have 1 minute.
Mark, do you have some time?
Let me check really quick. I think I can continue.
Actually, like I have a question to you.
Yes, I can do more.
Yeah. So the question I have to you, I already created in this document. There is this table where it's specified whether the configuration option is applicable on a level of stock or on the level of source. And also I had an assumption that merchant will have an ability to specify just on one particular level, whether it's source or stock, but not both. And another thing, we need to decide what kind of scopes exist for each particular option. For example, managed stock. Currently, we are able to specify just on a global level and on the stock item level. Whether we need to introduce an ability to specify it on a stock level. So, like in the proposal here, like backorder. Backorder, it's possible to specify on the level of source item. It's on the level of source item, source, and global. And for example, like safety stock threshold, it's possible to specify on the level of stock item and stock. So it would be great if we will agree where we need to introduce just a global level and the stock item level, or we need to use also a stock level. So we can add like a global / stock here, or just global.
Sorry, I got confused at the beginning because you said we have, if you scroll to the top there, we have stock already, and you said
because currently
did you mean add source?
It depends on the option, because if you're talking about backorders, it's gonna be source. If we're talking about, for example,
right, I was talking about the first option. So if you scroll to the top there, the first one in the table was managed stock.
Yes, managed stock. So we need to apply. We need to mention all the possible scopes here, whether it's just global or global is stock, or maybe something else.
What about websites?
Actually, I want to get away from scoping on the level of sales channel, because currently website would have a stock assigned to it. And actually, based on a website, we always can resolve a stock and can apply the configuration based on this stock. Because currently, website can have one and only one stock assigned to it. That's why, from this perspective, there is no need to specify a website as a sales channel.
Right. I understand. We can already achieve the configuration goal that the merchant wants to for stock without adding additional complexity.
Yes, exactly.
I suggest there was one more comment about general unlinking of inventory from Magento current scoping model.
Yeah.
It would be good to have completely independent scoping model that can be mapped on Magento scope, because if we deploy, as you guys know, the plan in future is to deploy inventory as a separate service, and ideally it should be independent of scope configuration. So it should basically just keep stock, source, and configuration on per any scope that you specify for it. Should be configurable. But it might not be this milestone. But it could be. In general, I think it's a good idea to discuss it.
I have a quick question, if you have a time, because I thought about this, but I have a technical issue because there is no problem for us, for example, to resolve to do what you just proposed to do, like resolve MSI scope based on Magento scope. But actually, that can introduce some side effect. For example, based on Magento website, we can resolve a stock and provide a way to apply data on that stock. But actually, taking into account that a stock could be potentially assigned to several websites, we can, as a side effect, affect the data, configuration data belonging to another website if we will do this resolving. From website to the stock. Because we have we have one-to-many relationship, and
I suggest to have separate meeting on this because it's an important topic. It's interesting. Most probably we will not be able to implement it in this milestone. That's might be.
Of course, we wouldn't. That's for sure.
Yeah, but that I suggest to discuss it earlier. If you can set up something, again, public discussion on this week or next week.
All the discussion on MSI track are public.
Good, great.
Okay, so probably we finalize the backlog, and regarding this the configuration story, I have a question to you, Mark, to look through this table and provide different options for scope for all of this configuration option, whether it's gonna be, and also like apply to source and stock. Could you please check whether it's correct from your point of view, or if not, just update it. Okay. I built it on my assumption whether it's supposed to belong to stock or source. And after we finalized, I believe Anton already looked through these interfaces, and he likes this option, so we can do like this.
Let's discuss.
Okay. So looks like this all for today. Thank you guys for your time. That was really, really productive from my point of view. We discussed quite a lot of interesting stuff as usual on MSI track. So thank you for your time, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.